Hi, Scott. um, really quick response to an M2 this week. And I'm doing this as a video, sort of an alternative to meeting in person, because that's never going to happen. And instead of putting it in an email. When it comes to the afterlife, I want to share my thoughts on that as the sun is setting. And this is, I quite obviously probably believe the opposite, that there is an afterlife. And I'm by no means trying to persuade you, because that pretty much doesn't happen. And but it's kind of like I read in the letter about the app, this second a day app. I have to hear things a bajillion times in order to even think about getting them. So if this is just one sort of one iteration of you hearing about an afterlife after you've heard about it a bajillion times already, then it's fine if that's all it is. But the weird story I want to tell you is about this guy Brian Weiss. He's actually I have a bajillion stories about this, but the kind of the funniest one, and maybe the one you'll relate to the most, is this guy Brian Weiss. He's a psychiatrist. He was head of the Department of Psychiatry at Mount Sinai in Miami. He looks exactly like Freud, actually. Just the Jewish white beard, a very, very calm human being. He speaks so slowly and so calmly that it's a marvel that he can hold the attention of several thousand people at a time. So he was doing his thing, being just a very classical psychiatrist, and he was working with this woman who had all these very complicated phobias and issues, and she was just one of those very puzzling patients, I should say. And that's when he tried to use regression on her to sort of believing, as most of psychology believes, that all of our issues originate in childhood traumas. So he tried to bring her back to her childhood, hoping that she'll remember things that she would have suppressed from conscious thought. And so he says to her, go back to the time when all these issues started. And she she goes, it's 1529 and it's England and it's the time of the plague. And he finds this all very strange, but records it, dutifully. And then she talks about the corpses, her child, this whole horrific story. And then he does some research, and he thinks at first, well, surely there wasn't actually the plague in England at any one point. But then he finds out that there actually was the plague for about 10 years, and it was exactly around the time that she mentioned. So, long story short, you can imagine all her symptoms get better, she improves, whatever. He is very confused about this whole thing, doesn't share it with anyone, but increasingly he uses that prompt with patients, and they keep bringing up these horrific stories from other times and places, so for 4 years he doesn't tell anyone at the hospital about this, but after that he feels that he's making much more progress with these things than with regular clinical practice, and he writes 6 books, and now he's kind of a big speaker. So I'm sure you've heard this kind of thing before, but I really resonated with that because I have a ton of moments in my life where things just kind of converged, and I felt that my thoughts and beliefs were from another time. Sort of fears that we don't need to have anymore, uh, it's because basically if you kind of slow down your perception a little bit and really pay attention to your thoughts, you'll see how much of what you're thinking is just pure bullshit. Like it's just kind of sort of the fear mind speaking, just kind of spewing things out. So and this gets better with meditation. Like you really start to follow and notice where thoughts come, you know, where they come, how they come out of nowhere, apparently. And so anyway, like one of my things, for example, is being chased. I've never been chased in this life. But sometimes when I'm walking down a street in Soho, like on Broadway between Prince and Spring, like that stretch, it's always full of people. And because I can't quickly run through, I can often panic. It's not like a real panic, but I notice that there's a sense of urgency in me that is not at all warranted. And I have a bunch of others that I won't share right now necessarily, but anyway, so my whole thought is that modern psychology is, I think, in its dawn years. We only, I think, deal with about 10% of what is at stake in our minds and bodies, and I think there's so much there about sort of from other dimensions that are somehow echoes or that have a resonance with what we feel right now. So how this applies to an afterlife, you can imagine what I'm going to say is that there's often in life, I've had several of these, where it's sort of a recognition of someone else, and it's like, oh, like when a person feels familiar. That mostly happens when you're scared of the person for some reason. I don't imagine you've ever had a reason to be scared of anyone at all in your life. But it's a very, it's happened to me twice that I've been really scared of someone I've just met in a very, among other people. And they've been friends of mine. So it was either among friends that I've met them or they became friends. Later on, one of these people is one of my best friends. So this is to say, or to suggest the possibility that many of the people in our life right now have been in our life before, and that there is a beautiful sort of theater of people coming in and out at different scenes. There's the closing of an act, there's the opening of another act, there's these chapters of life and of existence that sort of follow each other. But there's this sort of changing of costume and parts, but there is kind of a basic recognition there much of the time. So I could talk about this for hours, I'm sure you have no doubt, but I have a ton of experiences about this. I in my healing work, past lives comes up sometimes, and I should say past lives I use as just a sort of a very gross shortcut to whatever this sort of resonance is, this recognition and this sort of charge there. So I don't know that I have necessarily, that 100% of me was 100% of someone else at another time and space, but there is some kind of resonance that's meaningful, I think, and that can be very comforting. So this is where, so the main atheist sort of critique of spirituality is that it's done for comfort. So that people believe in God or in whatever so that they feel better, right? And it's sort of the opiate of the masses, or the sort of the wishful thinking in order to not face life's reality. And that's certainly a way to look at it. I think that, so, you know how it is when people try to force something on you, and you're kind of like, nah, not really. It doesn't feel good. Like you said that you make a lot of your decisions that they're gut decisions. So a lot of this stuff, I think we know whether it's for us or not, and it's sort of it's like a very quick yes and no. And sometimes if you don't catch it quick enough, it goes away. But so when I try to believe that this is it, that I'm never going to be alive again, that I'm going to cease to exist as a human being, I actually don't mind much of that, because what I have right now is so fulfilling and so real and just juicy. In many ways, I don't mind that. But if you tell me that all the other people around me who are struggling and who are trying to be good people, that there is no purpose in it for them other than to be animals who can talk, that sounds very, like, that just made my gut shrink. So I think you can look at it as sort of an opiate, trying to feel better about the cruel realities of the world, or you can think of it as our deeper intuition, knowing better, knowing some kind of mystery that maybe we haven't parsed out yet, that we don't have scientific lab experiments for, but that there's some kind of mystery that connects us through time and space, and that offers some kind of continuity, recognition, spark of consciousness. That makes me feel expansive, and it makes me want to take on the day and the world. And if it's my kind of opiate, I'll take it. And in the book, he gives all these examples of weird family dynamics that sort of the subject sort of finds roots for in like other times. So I think no family comes together out of randomness. There's so much charge in family relationships. I don't think we ever marry anyone that we haven't known before. I think there's a massive amount of recognition and a sense of calling there, and a sense of sort of something that needs to happen, something that needs to be, sort of played out or figured out or clarified or experienced together. And all of our struggles and our sort of efforts to be good people really matter. And they matter for more than our 86 years. All right, take care.